guest minister today, someone who graduated from Pedestal last year. He was on my 4x4 team that went to regionals, and Sam then went on to state by himself. And he is now currently running track at Mount Vernon Nazarene College while also studying ministry. I will let him tell you more. Please help me introduce Sam.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Carlos gave you a basic idea of who I am, but a lot of you probably still don't know me. If you do know me, it's probably because I invited you. So, like I said, my name is Sam Haley, and 147 days ago, I graduated from Pettisville High School. So, I've really grown up around here. It's always been my home. And I went to the Nazarene Church, or still am a member of the Nazarene Church on Cherry Street. So, I've always called this home until very recently, because I moved to college, like Carlos said. I moved into Mount Vernon Nazarene University just at the end of August. So that was quite a change for me. That was a very big adjustment. And I did that because, like I said, I went to a Nazarene church, and my end goal for life is to become a pastor of a small church. So I've gotten the opportunity to preach a few times at my own church and a few different churches, and I really appreciate getting to be here because it's a lot of fun, and I really like getting to see how God's working in a bunch of different ways through different churches. But as you can imagine, moving into college was kind of like flipping my life upside down, because for the first time in my life I have to do my own laundry, and that's like the number one thing that's really stuck out. But going into Mount Vernon's like 3 hours from here, just about 3 hours. It's just north of Columbus, if you don't know where it's at. And it is a beautiful campus. And that was one of my favorite things about the campus, because I toured a couple of different universities before deciding on ultimately going to Mount Vernon. And one of my favorite areas is the chapel, because we've got this chapel and we meet 3 times a week. And it's got these beautiful red carpets representing the blood of Jesus. It's got giant stained glass windows on either side and a fantastic worship team. And it's just such an amazing experience when we meet for chapel there. And then one of my other favorite areas on campus would be the caf. That's how the cool kids call the cafeteria. And I get to eat there whenever I want to. They've got cereal 24/7. And they've got as much food as I could possibly eat. I've gained 12 pounds in 6 weeks. So those are some of my favorite areas on campus. And as you can imagine, going from coming home to mom doing laundry to me having to get up, do my own schedule, go to class, go to practice, it's quite an adjustment. And I was thrown into this very quickly, but quite honestly, so far, college is a lot of fun. And before practice started for track, because like Carlos mentioned, I'm on the track team, so that started like 2 weeks in. And it was a big adjustment because I got to meet a lot of new people, so that made it a lot easier. And a lot of the upperclassmen there were inviting the freshmen to do workouts with them before, so I was meeting all these new people there, as well as in the caf and in the chapel. I was surrounded by a lot of different people. And that was a beautiful experience in itself, because the faith there is like something I've never seen before. It's not something that the campus is doing, or that the teachers are doing, or that the classes are doing, but one of the strongest representations of faith is the student body. And it's something like I've never seen before, because when I went to high school, it felt like I had to look for people with the same faith as I had. And now that I'm in college, I am surrounded by like 600 people at chapel throwing up their hands, and it's a genuine worship, so it's just a beautiful experience, and it feels pretty unique. Not a lot of people get to experience something like that. So I was in this whole new world, and like I said, I was loving it. But what I started to notice is how easy it was to fall into this rhythm, because once kind of the honeymoon phase of moving into college started, I had to get into classes, because now I'm an adult. I'm taking college classes, so I had to really get this rhythm going. And it was pretty busy. But I started to notice that as I was going through this rhythm of life, I was starting to neglect a genuine relationship because it was becoming very, very easy to do all of my classes and do all of my Bible readings because that's what everybody did, and go to chapel because that's what everybody did. But it wasn't something that I was taking personal as much as I even thought that I was. And getting busy, I'm sure, is something that happens to everybody. And I'm almost certain that everybody here would have called themselves or thought to themselves that they are busy this week. Because we just get wrapped up in life. A lot of people work, a lot of people have sports, a lot of people have to get kids to soccer practice. We've all got things that make us busy. And I think the scripture is in your bulletin there. I want to take a look at a reading from Daniel chapter 6. How many of you are familiar with the story Daniel and the Lion's Den? I'll put my hand up. A lot of people. That's a very, very familiar one. And it's one of the most common ones that you hear. It's one of the first ones you learn in Sunday school. At least for me, it was one of the first stories I knew growing up. It's a really cool story, but I'm not going to read it. I'm going to read what happens before that today. I want to look, well, I think I've got 6, 1 through 10 in there, but I want to kind of explain what was happening for context here. Daniel was working under the king. He was working under King Darius. And he was very faithful, and he was very honest and very hardworking, so he got himself into a position of pretty high authority. He was under the king, and he was attending a lot of the king's meetings. He was a very busy guy. I think it was explained as he was head of all of the wise men of Babylon, and he was just a very busy guy. As you can imagine, ruling a kingdom of over 25,000 people, you've got a lot on your plate. And I want to start in verse 6 here and just read what was going on, because a lot of people didn't like him. So this is what a lot of the people who couldn't find a fault in Daniel tried to do to him. So it says that these governors and satraps thronged before the king and thus said to him, "King Darius, live forever. All the governors in the kingdom, the administrators and the satraps, the counselors and advisors have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of Medes and Persians, that which does not alter. Therefore, King Darius signed the written decree." So what that was saying was that the people didn't like Daniel in his position of power, a lot because of his faith, but maybe they just didn't like their boss. So they were trying to find a fault in him, and they couldn't find a fault in him. So they said, because of his faith, let's make up this rule where if you bow down to anybody but the king, we'll throw you into the den of lions. And they knew that Daniel was going to bow down to his God because of his faith, and the king was going along with it because they're like, oh king, you're such a great guy, let's go for 30 days and just praise you. And he's like, okay. So he signed this into the rule. And let's look at the next verse. 6:10, chapter 6, verse 10, it says, "Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home, and in his upper room with his windows open towards Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day, and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days." So a lot of us know what happens next. They didn't like that he went against the decree. And we know that he was thrown into the den of lions. And we can admire Daniel's faith to go against that. But that's not what I want to look at today. I want to look at the very end of that. It says he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. So Daniel had this big job, and he was in charge of like 25,000 people, and he was under the king, so it was probably a lot of stress being that close to the king as well. But he took time out of his day to kneel down, close his eyes before God 3 times, as was his custom since early days. So he didn't just do it when they said, whoever goes against this rule is thrown into the den of lions. He didn't do it out of rebellion. He did this because it was his custom. It was his commitment. He did that to God his whole life. And it's it's just so important to note the kind of relationship that Daniel had with God, because I think it's something that's very important for us in our lives to have that strong commitment with following God, a personal commitment, not just going through the motions. And there's a few reasons as to why it's important, not just because God tells us to, because he does tell us to. He tells us to do everything in faith. But when we don't do everything in faith, and when we start to go through our lives without looking at God, we start to replace God with earthly things. And we start to go through our lives and not think. Maybe we're not even doing it out of rebellion. Maybe we're just getting into our rhythms of life and not thinking and just forgetting to praise in everything. And then we start to fill that time and that thought with work or track or sports or whatever the kids are doing or whatever you've got going on in your life. You're starting to fill your life with temporary things. And getting to college, I've got a very physical grasp on how temporary a lot of the permanent feeling things in my life are because, again, on the track team, being 22 is old in track because I'm seeing students who have had their career ended because of a 6-week injury in high school. And it's so tangible how temporary everything is now that you're in the Calgate athletics. And that was just an example, but really it showed me how temporary everything really is and how everything I was relying on was temporary. And everything in our life is temporary except God. So we need to be filling our lives with God. And when we start to fill our life with these temporary things, they're going to let us down because they are temporary. And that's what I started to see. But the second thing that we miss is we just miss God. We just don't see God. Because when we're filled our life with temporary things, we start to not look for God. Because God's there. How many of you woke up this morning? If you didn't raise your hands, please do. So, yes, you woke up, and that wasn't just something that happened. God woke you up. God decided that you need to have one more day to serve him. I don't know if he's going to give you tomorrow, but I know he gave you today to serve him. I don't know if he's going to give me tomorrow. But that was an act of God. It didn't just happen. See, when we put God in the center of our life and we build everything that we do around God, we can see that he's really there. And we can see that he's really doing everything. I've seen times in my life where I started to pray for something, and like maybe I've got a test or I've got a big track meet, something that's adding a lot of stress. Maybe I've got a friend or a family member with health issues, and it's something I'm really stressed about, and I'm praying, and then 2 weeks later I forget about it. But then when I look back over those 2 weeks, how miraculous of a thing that couldn't just possibly happen, how it all worked out. I get to see when I'm thinking about God, how he's working, because you miss miracles when you don't look for them. Because they're there. God's still working miracles. And one more thing that's fantastic about having God in the center of our lives is that we don't need to put all of the pressure of our life on our back, because like I said, we're all busy people. We've all got big people jobs, big adult jobs, or sports, or something keeping us busy. And when we put God in the center of our life, we don't need to worry about that, because God can take our stresses. We just lay everything down for God, and he'll take care of us, and he'll provide. And from my personal experience, that is such a calming feeling. I don't have to go through life on my own, because I don't want to go through life on my own. That would be scary after seeing how God can get me through. So, what I really want to say is how important it is. I really hope that just proves, from my personal experience, how important it is to have God in the center of everything. And there's ways that we can do that, but we sometimes need to change to do that, because we forget and we don't want to. Sometimes we just don't want to. Mount Vernon, the NAS is what we call it, because Mount Vernon Nazarene University is a mouthful. So the NAS got a new track coach this year. So that was an adjustment for a lot of the athletes who have worked 5 years with the old track coach. But when we first got down there, before practice even started, he got all of the sprinters and all the jumpers and all the distance runners together, and we got us all in this one room, and he introduced us to the new coaching staff and to his family and his kids. They're all wonderful people. He's got a fantastic family, but he made the points for his vision. He was talking about the vision for his track team. And he said the number one thing he wants to push is worship, which is not something you hear on a lot of college-level track teams or college-level sports teams. The coach wants to push worship. And he said that worship is not just what we do for 10 minutes on Sunday morning when they're singing, but it's something that we do in all that we do. And that's something that really made me think, because it's something that you do in all of your workouts. You do it intentionally, not just for a workout, but you do it for God. And whether you're studying for a test, you got to do it intentionally to actually get the knowledge, because that'll better you for life, and do it for God. Whether you're ordering food, you can do it for God. Whether you're going to church, you can do it for God. Be intentional with it. Whether you're going to work, do it for God. Worship's not just when you're standing up singing the song, raising your hands for 10 minutes, and then you're going out and doing whatever you want to in life. Worship is all that we do. And 1 Corinthians 10:31 says that, therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. God's telling us, whatever you're doing in life, you just have to do it for the glory of God. So, whatever you're doing in life, because whatever you're doing in life could be a lot of stuff. We're all busy. I've established that. We're all busy people. But we need to look for God and do it genuinely. When I first moved into college, I was in this whole new world, and I was having a fantastic time. I'm still having a fantastic time, but it's a lot of fun going to college. But what I realized is how easy it is to go through the motions. And like I said, I felt like I was starting to neglect a personal relationship. I didn't feel like it then, but now I see that I was. And how slow of a track it was to get down there. The progression was very smooth to where I didn't even notice it until I was back, and I was like, I'm way far away from where I need to be. And almost the first day, I started doing my prayers. I had been doing my prayers. I've been reading my Bible. I've been going to church and chapel. And in the prayers, I made this up for myself because it was something I was experiencing, but I don't think I'm the only one that experienced it. I was praying for God to take away my dry faith, is what I called it, because I felt like I was going to church, I was going to chapel, I was doing everything I needed to, but I wasn't feeling anything. I wasn't feeling God. I wasn't feeling Him working. And I was saying, Lord, please take this dry faith when I was in chapel. And I was at church. I'd say, Lord, take this. I'm here, I'm listening. And about 1% of my week, I would spend time with God. I would spend time reading my Bible. I would spend time in church, truly worshiping. I'm like, God, where are you? And then the other 99% of my week, close my ears. I wasn't listening. Because I felt everybody was doing what they were supposed to be doing. It's what it looked like to me. Everybody was there truly worshiping God. And then I was there. Lord, where are you? I'm listening. And I quit listening. And I just went throughout my week. I didn't even necessarily go do bad things. I just stepped back into my rhythm once I walked through those chapel doors. I went back to where I was. I went back to going to class. I went back to going to practice. I just went back to what I was doing. But I wasn't doing it for God. I wasn't listening for God to speak to me. I was there when everybody else was. I was there at church or at chapel, listening, waiting. But I wasn't really listening or waiting. I was just there. And about the third week, we had what the NAS calls Fall Revival. And how many of you have ever been to a revival service? Not that many. I'll put my hand down because I hadn't until about 3 weeks ago. And a revival service, well, I said we have chapel 3 times a week. That was Monday morning, Wednesday night, and Friday morning. And then Sunday we go to church whenever. So that's how the schedule works. But the revival service, we had an evangelist, a fellow named Reverend Kevin Jack, came from Southern Ohio, and he did 5 services, Monday morning, Monday night, Tuesday morning, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. They were all in a row. This was the revival. And it was actually really fantastic because I went into it not knowing how far I was, but I knew I was having dry faith because I was listening, but I wasn't feeling anything. I wasn't truly feeling it, but I'm like, what's this guy going to do? Because I'm doing everything right. So what's this possibly going to do for me? How is God going to speak to me through this when I'm already doing what I need to be doing? Because I didn't know I wasn't doing what I needed to be doing. So that's when I realized that I was spending 1% of my life truly listening, and the other 99 not. Kevin Jack made a lot of fantastic points. It's online, the whole revival, if you want to watch it. It was a fantastic 5 total hours of worship. A lot of people gave their lives to Christ for the first time. A lot of people, it was welcome to the community. So a lot of people in their 80s went up. They were like, Lord, move me to where I need to be. It was so fantastic to see God truly moving people. But this was Tuesday night is where he really pointed out what I needed to do. Because Monday morning, Monday night, and Tuesday morning, I fortunately was able to make all 5 chapels because a lot of people had classes, but I was able to make all of them, so I didn't have any reason not to go, so I made all of them. I got to listen to all of the messages, and Tuesday night, I was sitting there for about half hour into the message. I wasn't hearing anything. The first 3, I was having a fantastic time. I was feeling God there, and I was like, there's 5 of them. There's got to be duds somewhere, right? So that's what I thought. I was just not going to get anything from this one. I thought I was just going to sit there. I was like, this guy can't be fantastic, all of them. But then at the end of the message, this one touched me more than I even thought was possible. This was the one that stuck out to me. Excuse me. Kevin Jack said, he made the point that God doesn't meet you where you are. That's something we hear a lot in the church, is that God will meet you where you are. And we say that and give off a meaning that's not accurate. Because when we say that, it's true that God doesn't need you to be any better than you are to receive his grace. Where we are is a fantastic starting point. It doesn't matter where we start to receive God's grace, but God doesn't come to you there. He said that God doesn't meet you where you are, he brings you to where he is. And that requires moving. Because if you're looking for God, and if you're listening for God, but you're clinging to your life of a lie, or you're clinging to your life of a sin or addiction, and you're still clinging to that, if God were to come and meet you there, he would have embraced the lie. God is there welcoming and waiting for you to come to him, to change your life and come to him. But he's not going to come and embrace your lie. You can't have both. You got to let go of one of them. And that took adjustment. That was when I realized that I needed to adjust how I was looking at it, because God showed me that I needed to let go of holding on to my life, because I wanted to control my life. I wanted to make the decisions. I wanted to pick what cereal I was eating in the cat. I wanted to make all of the decisions in my life. But I needed to let go of that control. I needed to let God in and work through me. And that takes adjustment. That can be uncomfortable, to allow God to move, to bring you to where he is. Because God doesn't just meet you where you are, he brings you to where he is. But that move is what we need to be open to. That is what's hard. That is how we can truly get God into the center of everything, because he needs to be in the center of everything. I told you, it's so much easier going through life and all of the stresses with the creator of the universe holding hands with you. It's so much easier. But we need to do that. We need to get up and go. That's what I heard at Revival. I needed to let go and get up and go. And I had to make a change for that. Ecclesiastes 11:4 says, whoever watches the wind will not plant, whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. And in itself, that verse doesn't make much sense, so I want to read it out of the Message too. It says, don't sit there watching the wind. Do your own work. Don't stare at the clouds. Get on with your life. So, to me, that means don't just sit there and wait for the perfect time to make a change in your life. God gave us today. I don't know if he's giving us tomorrow. We're here now, and there's no perfect time. There's no perfect time to make a change in your life. You just have to make the change in your life now. We can't just sit there and wait. So if we're going to move to where God is and let go of where we are, we leave the lie over there and come to where He is, we need to do it now. And Daniel, looking at his prayer life, he knelt down and prayed to God with his eyes closed 3 times a day. That is a big commitment, because I'll be honest, I don't have that kind of commitment. I don't close my eyes, kneel down, and pray to God 3 times a day. That's a lot of time. And that's not even counting the times where Daniel was driving into work and praying and turning on Caleb. That's not talking about the walk into work. That's not talking about whatever he was doing, drinking coffee in the morning. It's not talking about that. This is when he was closing his eyes. He was down here, listening, spending alone time with God. That's what we need in our life. We need to make this commitment for God to work through us. And we need to be alone with God. And I had to make a change in my life. I've added prayer life to my mornings because I used to read my Bible and do my prayers at night because that's when it worked best to my schedule, but that was stupid. Because I'm a morning person. How am I going to get anything when I'm falling asleep? I had to make this uncomfortable change in my life. This was really adjusting my schedule is kind of a small change. But we really need to make changes in our lives if we truly want God to work through us. And God will honor that commitment. Because when we look at Daniel's prayer life, we can use it as an example, but it's not saying that we need to kneel down for this specific amount of time 3 times a day. That's not what it's saying. We don't need to do it exactly how Daniel did. We just need to have our own commitment for God to follow. To God will meet us there. That's what it means. He'll meet us there. When we move, He's waiting for us. It doesn't matter where we start, as long as we move to Him. We're open for Him to move us to Him, but we gotta let go. So I've made a change in my life, but after that, after the revival, I made this change in my life, and then for the next week, I was like, Lord, don't let it come back, because I felt like this revival was gonna come, and then I hit the same downhill slope again, probably until spring revival. I didn't want that. I'm like, Lord, don't let the dry faith come back. And that's why we need to move. That's why we need to change our lives. As in Ecclesiastes 11:4, we need to do it now. There's no perfect moment. We can't just wait around for it. We need to make the change in our lives to truly get God in the center of everything. And that's how we can truly honor Him. Like I said, God's going to honor the commitment. If you make a change in your life, more for Him, He'll meet you there. He'll honor that. But we need to let go of the control and the sins and be willing for Him to move us. Because God doesn't meet you where you are. He brings you to where He is. But you need to be open to let Him bring you to where He is. Thank you.